welcome to another dive into our Stephen King universe. Perfect for Halloween. And today we are discussing a short story which was first published in Cavalier magazine in around October 1970, and it is the second story in the Night Shift collection, which is the first Stephen King short story collection published in 1978. Now, if you have a phobia or you really don't like rats, then this one probably is not going to be for you. And this video has full spoilers if you haven't already read it. But if you have, or if you just want to find out what I'm talking about, then we'll dive right in. And yes, I am wearing gloves because my hands are freezing. The rest of me is fine, but my hands are cold. So I'm just gonna rock my skull gloves for the video. So this story is set in the town of Gates Falls in Maine. Most of Stephen King's, especially the early stuff, is all set in and around Maine, which makes sense because that's where he's from. If I was writing, then most of my stories would probably be about the northeast of England, because you write about what you know. And we follow the character of Hall. Now, most characters in this are only known by their surname. You don't get to know their first names at all. And he's working the graveyard shift in the textile mill. And if you don't know what a graveyard shift is, it's the shift mostly between about midnight to about 7 a.m. It's the night shift, basically, when there's hardly anybody about. So there's hardly anybody about, and he practically works this floor, the third floor, on his own. And he's on his own, apart from the rats. And they are just kind of milling about in the background. It is a textile mill. There's stuff. It is a textile mill. There's practically no organisation at all. There's just stuff lying around, stuff that has been there decades, that's too old to use and really be any good whatsoever, but too valuable to just really chuck out and get rid of. And that kind of stuff attracts the rats, whether for nesting or for eating or for whatever they're doing. And Hall uses his downtime while he's waiting for somebody else to send stuff down to him to chuck empty cans at the rats that come a bit too close, because they don't really seem afraid of humans, just kind of curious, but they're not going to stand their ground when something gets pelted at them like this. And this sort of first area kind of sets the scene, it sets the atmosphere. It's half disused, it's dusty, it's dirty. There's stuff lying around everywhere. It's the middle of the night. There's hardly anybody about. And the rats. Lots of rats who don't seem particularly afraid of the human element. Sort of like the humans are in their space rather than the rats being where they shouldn't be. Now, our viewpoint is from the character of Hall. He is a young drifter who moves around from place to place, does a myriad of different jobs before winding up at the Gates Falls textile mill. He has no family ties. He is on his own and has been on his own for probably the past few years. And because this is just like a shift in a mill, there are only a certain few characters actually at play in this. And the main three are Hall, from whom we get the viewpoint and the narration of the story and his thoughts, his psyche, his supervisor Warwick, and his fellow colleague Wisconski. Now, there is a lot of setting up of how things go on in this mill, what it looks like, how the atmosphere is, what it feels like, how it would like to be there at that time of night. Let's just say that health and safety doesn't exist at all. And because this was written in, let's say, 1970-ish, at least here in the UK, I don't know what it's like in America, but at least here in the UK, the actual Health and Safety Act in the workplace did not come into law until 1974, which is 4 years after this was first published in the Cavalier magazine. Now, this takes place over the 4th of July weekend, and Warwick has to assemble a team to clean out the basement, which is just full of just piles of junk, of old stuff that can be scrapped, the stuff that they can probably get money for. And more space means more people to work, means more revenue coming in. And nobody's been actually down in this basement for anything in, say, the past decade or so. So you can imagine what kind of disgusting state it's in, especially given the descriptions of where they actually work. And there ends up being about a group of 35, 36 guys, all in this task force team. And these guys are split up into two groups. So you've got, with one group has control of the industrial water hoses, turn them on, turn them off, snagging, etc. And the crap crew. And the crap crew has to go in before the water hoses and clear everything out by hand. Everything, I don't think they're actually wearing gloves either at the beginning of this, because I think at one point they're just having their sort of lunch in the middle of the night and their hands are just black with dirt and grime that even industrial cleaner won't shift. It's just disgusting. And right off the bat, there are issues. No pun intended. The rats down in the basement are big. Bigger than the ones that are up on the other floors where humans come in and out. And these ones, while being bigger, are not afraid of humans in their vicinity. And this is very much their area. And a couple of these rats are actually described as being cat-sized. Which just, ugh. And a few of them, while the crap crews are, taking apart all this furniture, moving stuff away from the walls, disturbing all these little rats' nests, literally. A few of the crew members get attacked by these rats. I think one latches onto one of them's arm and refuses to let go even when being battered to a bloody pulp. One of them latches onto one of the guy's chests and hangs there while his forepaws are like kicking and scraping at his stomach. It's just disgusting, and it would drive anybody absolutely crazy to have that. But like I said, health and safety doesn't exist, there is a job to do, and Warwick keeps them as a hard taskmaster. The guy is a bit of an ass. And in the middle of all this, the dynamic is very much between Hall and Warwick. There's a little bit of sort of tension. In the beginning, Warwick keeps calling him college boy, which probably refers to him that he's a bit insecure about this guy being educated and him not. But there are little nuances between them. And as the story continues to build and it becomes a little bit more apparent that Hall is not your just usual normal guy. Like, he's not working with a full deck, really. And whether it be from overwork, overexertion, working a night shift, not having really any life outside of that, both the element of the rats and Warwick seem to take hold in his mind and become entwined there, especially the rats. Like on his normal day-to-day shift, he has to deal with them creeping up and chucking cans at them, and in this basement they are everywhere. So when he finishes his shift, he goes home and he dreams about rats. He wonders about them. He dreams about them. Every moment of his life tends to be filled with thoughts of rats. And he even goes so far as to go to the library and research them. And looks up the zoning for the mill specifically because of this rat problem. Which all culminates in a mutiny of sorts when Hall and Wisconski discover a wooden trapdoor in the floor of the basement. Now the basement is supposed to be, that's the level, that's it. There is nothing underneath it, except for this trapdoor leading to a sub-level that nobody knew about. And Hall correctly surmises that this is where all the rats are running to, and this is where all the rats are coming from. Although it's not explained how they're getting in and out of this trapdoor because it's closed. Now this mutiny is spearheaded by Hall because while researching at the library about the rats, he's been also looking at the zoning of the mill. And the zoning committee is something like, if there's such an infestation and so many witnesses come forward, that the mill will get shut down come the first day of work after the 4th of July weekend. And how would Warwick like his bosses to come back and know that the whole place is shut down unless Warwick goes in this basement and they have to clear it out. And the guys that have been round him, have been bit, are dealing with all this crap. They just have had enough. So Warwick declares that of course they should go down in the basement and Hall, as the guy who brought this up, is the guy that's to go down there. Him and his partner Wisconski, which he is not impressed about at all, And he says, if you're afraid of being down in the dark, you can take one more person, which Hall sets him up for. And Hall says, right, well, I think the management should, be there in case to prevent me seeing too many rats. And he chooses Warwick to go down with them. And of course, all the other guys love it because Warwick is just the bane of their life at the minute, and they just want him to get either a good kicking or a good scare. So they all try and bring this trapdoor up, and it takes a lot of pulling, and once they've yanked it all up, it practically disintegrates. But underneath, on the underside of this trapdoor, is a rusty iron padlock. And this starts to raise a few red flags, especially with Warwick. Because, as he says, you would think that if there was a padlock, it would be on top of the trapdoor and not on the underside, which means somebody had to be down there to lock it. And why would they stay down there and lock it shut? But not to be deterred, all three of them descend down the steps into the darkness with torches and one hose. And at this point, you get the impression that Hall is not completely sane. He is intent on killing Warwick, or more specifically, he is intent on having the rats kill Warwick for some reason, because all this is going round in his head. Now, the subcellar is silent, dark, and wet because there's the river flowing by it. As with most textile mills, they're built on the bank of a river. Now, the further they go in, the more the tension starts to ramp up until Warwick declares that enough is enough and makes to turn back to the trapdoor and leave. At which point, Hall grabs him by the scruff of the neck and has this industrial hose nozzle turned at his head and says, if you don't go on, I'm going to turn it on. Now, Wisconski at this point bails, as anyone would probably even before this, but he goes back up. And the more that they walk forward in this subcellar, the more rats surround them. Now, they can tell by the torches, they're just plumed on where they're going, but they can see this sort of horde of rats just surrounding them, not coming too close and not coming within the sort of flashlight area, but they are there. They can hear their stealthy noises, they can hear the pitter-patter of their feet, and they can hear the little squeaks and shuffles that they can put out. Now, at one point when Hall glances back to see what they're doing, they're not just sort of walking in a corridor. Behind them, the rats are closing that gap. And more than a few of them are chomping on the water hose cable, trying to chomp through it, basically. And the whole situation is captured perfectly in this paragraph. A skull green with mould laughed up at them. Further on, Hall could see an ulna, one pelvic wing, part of a rib cage. Keep going, Hall said. He felt something bursting up inside him, something lunatic and dark with colours. You are going to break before I do, Mr. Foreman, so help me God. They walked past the bones. The rats were not crowding them, their distances appeared constant. Up ahead, Hall saw one cross their path of travel. Shadows hid it, but he caught sight of a pink tail, twitching as thick as a telephone cord. Up ahead, the flooring rose sharply, then dipped. Hall could hear a stealthy rustling sound, a big sound, something that perhaps no living man had ever seen. And it occurred to Hall that he had perhaps been looking for something like this through all his days of crazy wandering. Now they get to this brow of the hill, and the rats down here are not like normal rats. They're not even like the cat-sized ones that are up on the basement. These ones have mutated in constant darkness and have grown to a size of about 3 or 4 feet. Tall, long, however you want to do it. But most of them are blind, and some of them don't have any back legs, so they're sort of wheeling themselves, crawling along at quite a fast pace for them only using the front ones. Now, when they get to this hill type thing, and Warwick is the first up it, and he's the first to look down, and whatever he sees is so vulgar that he turns tail and he runs. And at doing this, Hall turns the hose on him, starts it, and the flurry of high-pressured water hits Warwick in the back and sends him flying off into darkness. And all Hall and us, the reader, can hear and visualise is a wet, ripping sound and Warwick's dwindling screams in the darkness. Now Hall, instead of turning back, he continues to the top of this hill and he looks down, giving us the vision of what is in this hole. And he sees a rat queen, a rat that is described as being as big as a baby calf. And it is large, it is grey, it is pulsating, and it is birthing. And while the other rats in the background are ripping his erstwhile foreman apart, he's just staring down at this vision of insanity that goes against all the laws of nature. At this sight, Hall turns back towards the trapdoor and sees that he is completely surrounded by rats that have either crept up behind them or have noticed his presence. He is an interloper in their kingdom. Now, to his kind of credit, given that he's completely crackers by this time, he does actually nearly make it back to the trapdoor, until flying rats start smashing into his face. And these are not bats, these are flying rats with their tails still, and they keep smashing into his face and their tails coil around his neck. Now he tries to use this industrial hose on them, but because they've been chewing, and he did see them, because they've been chewing through the cable, cloth, whatever it was, the pressure is not there anymore. There's hardly any water coming out in the first place, and then it just dwindles to a stop. And the rats seem to sense this, they seem to have the intelligence to know this, and they start running at him, they're crawling up his legs, they're hanging on, they're biting every part of his body they can reach, and they are just hanging off every part of him right now. And of course he goes insane, which anybody would that'd go a bit crazy having rats just dangling everywhere. And the last you hear of him, see of him, whatever, is he just starts laughing like a lunatic. And the story ends with a switch to the viewpoint of the guys that are all crowded around the trapdoor, seemingly hearing this go down, sort of looking at each other and saying, well, we should really go down and, see what's up. They could be in trouble. They weren't exactly getting on. And because Hall and Warwick haven't come back up, I don't know what Wisconsin said to them, but he's still there. And they just say, well, it's only a few rats. What the hell? We'll go down and see what's going on. And that's where it ends. Now, I have a theory. I have a theory that the rats were human at one point, because there is a skeleton which is down there, and I'm assuming that is the guy that put the padlock on the trapdoor before he turned, or while he knew that his co-workers were turning, or whether it was a cult. But that's kind of the way that I think that this originated, kind of thing. Now, I might be looking too far into it, but I like looking too far into stuff like this. I really like deep diving fiction. And I think that guy was down there, he locked the padlock because of some nefarious goings on down with the rats, whether somebody was injecting themselves with blood or whether they were just eating rats raw. Sometimes it's good to be in my head, sometimes it's not. But that's my theory. Somebody's down there, that's why the trapdoor has a padlock on the underside rather than the above side, which you usually would. Now, this tale is not my favourite short story by far, and it's not even my favourite in this collection. But it's not the worst. The worst in this collection for me is I Am the Doorway, and that video's probably I'm going to be doing a video on all of them, but that one is just it's just ridiculous. But it is down there with the ones that I don't particularly, I wouldn't say like, but it's not my first port of call if I just want a few short stories to read. But like many of King's work, this has been adapted into a movie. Yes, you heard that right. This Unhinged thing is actually a movie. And it was made into a film in October 1990, which I haven't seen and hadn't heard of until I did my research for this video. And looking up, its plotline seems to follow the book alright, but it expands on the story, which is not unusual for a short story adaptation, because usually the short stories, that's what they are. They are short. And a film is like roughly about 90 minutes, And this movie goes further down the insanity rabbit hole that only 80s and early 90s B horror films can do. The carnage, the effects, everything is just crackers. It's just insanity on a screen. Now, what I read of the movie plot is that the character of Hall survives and at the end clocks out, which annoys me that it deviates from the book ending. I hate it when films deviate from the book ending. I don't care if it screws around in the middle, but keep to the source material. But that's just the age-old cry of readers everywhere when their book gets turned into a movie, especially King fans. I see you, Dark Tower. I see you. You are not what we wanted. But on that note, let me know what you think down below, and what is your favourite King short story, or your favourite King adaptation book into movie. Let me know down in the comment section below, and as always, hit that little subscribe button and activate that notification bell so you will know every time I upload a brand new video. And, as always, keep your spooky selves reading this Halloween.